Greetings, parasite ecologists. In our final video on the apicomplexan parasite Toxoplasma gondii, I want to broaden our view out from rodents, cats, and people, because toxo can get into pretty much any mammal, even ones that would seem to be pretty improbable hosts for a terrestrial parasite. Toxoplasmosis is a huge problem for the conservation of endangered southern sea otters. Sea otter populations are not doing particularly well for a variety of reasons, and toxoplasmosis certainly isn't helping matters. It causes convulsions, encephalitis or swelling in the brain, and death in affected sea otters. Whenever a sea otter washes up on a beach, the carcass is collected and sent for necropsy by a team of marine mammal vets who are able to diagnose the cause of death. As they do that, they find a really interesting constellation of things that cause sea otter mortality. This pie chart shows the causes of death for 241 freshly dead sea otters that were necropsied between 1998 and 2003. Sea otters wash up all the time, and when someone finds one, you are required by law to report it to the authorities so that it can be collected and necropsied. Now, you saw this pie chart before when we talked about acanthocephalin peritonitis. But let's now look at a few other slices of the pie, because there are actually a bunch of parasitic causes of death for these sea otters, including bacteria and fungi. But I want you to focus on the lower left-hand pie slice in yellow, which is labeled infectious protozoal encephalitis. This encompasses toxoplasmosis and also another kind of apicomplexan parasite called sarcocystis. Together, toxo and sarco parasites cause about 12.4% of deaths among these sea otters. But there's also another slice that I want you to look at in the upper right-hand corner of the chart. That big blue pie slice tells us that almost 18% of sea otter deaths are due to trauma by sharks. And you might think that that doesn't have anything to do with toxoplasmosis, but you would be wrong. Sea otter mortality due to toxoplasmosis occurs for two reasons. One is the direct pathology of infection, the protozoal encephalitis, but the other is the increased likelihood that sea otters will be eaten by sharks when they are infected by Toxoplasma gondii. Sea otters with fatal shark bites are about 3 times more likely to have toxo. These sea otters infected with Toxoplasma gondii show some of the same behaviors we see in infected people. They are less risk-averse, they take more risks. They venture outside of the kelp forest more frequently, where they are more susceptible to predation by sharks. So toxoplasmosis is a problem not just because of the direct mortality of infection, but also because of its effects on sea otter behavior, which can make them more predisposed to being killed in a shark attack. Now, how are otters becoming infected? Because as far as we know from previous videos, toxoplasmosis is a disease of cats. It's transmitted to people through cat feces. So how are cats getting toxoplasmosis into these sea otters, which are marine mammals with no terrestrial life stage? Well, it turns out it's actually pretty easy to get your oocysts into the ocean if you're a parasite that's being pooped out onto land. And that's because land accumulates these Toxoplasma oocysts, and they can then be washed into fresh waters and eventually delivered into coastal habitats. The oocysts are resilient enough that they can make that whole journey and persist long enough in a saltwater environment to be transmitted to sea otters. Things like sewage, storm drains, and runoff from agricultural fields can all carry Toxoplasma gondii oocysts because there are so many cats across this landscape. People are putting cat feces down the toilet, which leads to oocysts being present in sewage. Cats are also pooping across the entire landscape because many people let their pet cats roam outside. And these cats are eating wild game, getting infected with toxo, and then pooping in the wild, where their feces can end up being washed into the ocean, where it can affect sea otters. One place where this has been really well studied is Elkhorn Slough in Moss Landing, California. The slough drains a very large area with a lot of agricultural impact. Agricultural lands are more likely to allow sediments to deposit into freshwater ecosystems because they don't hold onto soil as well. That means that oocysts are more likely to be washed into that area than they might be in a forested or otherwise vegetated habitat. The sea otters that hang out in Elkhorn Slough are very likely to be Toxoplasma infected, and in fact, they're far more likely to be infected than some of their neighbors residing just a little way up or just a little way down the coast from them. About 76% of the animals that reside near heavy freshwater flows have antibodies to Toxoplasma gondii. Now, there's a lot of controversy about how sea otters get toxoplasmosis because domestic cats are not the only cats on the landscape. In California and along the west coast of North America, we do not have cheetahs or lions, but we do have mountain lions and bobcats. So there's been a long-term controversy about whether it's mountain lions and bobcats versus domestic cats that are contributing to Toxoplasma oocysts that wind up infecting sea otters. Here are some data taken from California and Colorado. The codes that you see on the x-axis represent different locations. Some of those are in Colorado, some are in California. You can see that there are data for bobcats on the left, pumas, otherwise known as mountain lions, in the middle, and domestic cats on the right. On the y-axis is the prevalence of Toxoplasma gondii in these captured animals, as revealed by blood antigen tests. These researchers captured bobcats, pumas, and domestic cats, and then they tested to see whether they had been exposed to Toxoplasma gondii. All of these were outdoor cats, wild bobcats, wild mountain lions, and outdoor domestic cats. What the researchers found was that the prevalence of Toxoplasma in the bobcats and the pumas was way higher than the prevalence in domestic cats. And if you think about it, that actually makes a lot of sense. Domestic cats get most of their food at home, and cat food is free of Toxoplasma. Domestic cats eat a little bit when they're out in nature, and that's where their Toxoplasma infections come from. But of course, the prevalence among domestic cats is going to be much lower than that of the bobcats and pumas that are eating outside all the time. We've got bobcats and pumas with really high levels of infection, but there are fewer of them across the landscape. And we've got domestic cats with really low levels of infection, but there are many more domestic cats, particularly in coastal areas, compared to bobcats and pumas. Which of these cats is responsible for getting these southern sea otters sick? It's important to figure this out because if we want to prevent sea otters from getting toxo, we've got to go to the source. And to go to the source, we've got to figure out what the source is. Think about how you would design a study to investigate whether wildcats or domestic cats are responsible for transmitting toxo to otters. Leave your thoughts in the comment section below. For now, I think we can safely say that Toxoplasma gondii is, if not the world's most successful parasite, certainly one of the most successful parasites in the world. With that, we'll close out the Toxoplasma gondii section of the phylum Apicomplexan. When we come back together, we'll talk about another apicomplexan, Plasmodium, the etiologic agent of malaria. I'll see you in the next video.